How do we deal with uncertainty? Say, training in Thailand, living in Thailand when I was there is everything is so well organized here, so functional. Kind of an illusion that we prop up. So that it's great actually to integrate failure and difficulty. Okay, so we'll get on to the questions. And there's still quite a few left from yesterday. So I'll start with those. Greetings, Ajahns. Reflection, a fullness of heart, thankfulness arises, triple gem, and paying respects to the senior monastic. In this way, the act for me doesn't succumb to hollowness. To deepen this practice, what are further reflections one could contemplate and hold as intentions when bowing to either the triple gem or paying respects? And, I think Thanksgiving Day, so that sense of extending gratitude out, and when you start to extend it out, you realize that recognition of how we rely on the examples, and certainly, say, from the Buddha and from the time of the Buddha, 2.5 millennia involved in that, so that to be extending that out in different ways, and then just on kind of day-to-day nuts and bolts existence as a human being, we rely on so much. So that and one of the qualities that the Buddha points to of a one who is like a full human being, trustworthy, is gratitude, and then a willingness to reciprocate that gratitude. So that is of course, those are really wholesome qualities to. Next question. How would spiritual friendship look like for lay people other than the Sangha or Buddhists following the 5 precepts, given that they are not available? But on the other hand, they're also extremely generous and very much caring for their close ones to the level that is quite admirable, and I can learn much. How to relate to them to serve as a good example yet. I think one of the things is just, paying attention to the qualities of a good person, a good human being, and on goodness. I know lots of Buddhists. I know even know monks who gossiping, harsh speech, and idle chatter are a feature. But it's like drawing close to and recognize, really create wholesome qualities within oneself, and then also tend to foster a kind of division, kind of inner well-being and then external harmony are qualities that you want to be paying attention to. What is it that is fostering those qualities and to foster those? So it's not necessarily, again, it's just looking at the human condition and whether somebody is or is not a Buddhist, or whether they call themselves. I remember when Ajahn Pasanno talks about when he was a younger monk. He'd been a monk for a few years, and if he thought he would ever go back to America to establish to teach and kind of rant, kind of a negative rant of oh, we could never go back there, go back to America. There's, they just not going to work. And Ajahn Chah looked at him with this really kind of care and concern, compassion, and said, how many people know about the tradition? It's fundamental kindness. So learning how to foster that within oneself and then to draw close to that with others. The world, Ajahn Pasanno says that social action begins with ourselves and stresses the importance of training ourselves through sila, samadhi, and panya. However, he also mentions that the social development sector and seeing many unwanted and unwholesome results coming from very good intentions, would quitting this sector, quote-unquote, retreating. Clarification. That sense of social action, because so much of, it can be driven by idealism. It's not so useful, but that can be, and then positing or putting effect, change externally, and hoping that whenever the world is fixed, then I'll be happy. That's a that's wholesome fruit to that in the end. So that one has to pay attention to balance. We have to learn how, because whatever we have to give, what we actually create within ourselves, so that to be able to give good example and good advice and good counsel and is very much dependent on actions bear much more fruit. So it's like getting the balance. Burnout are very real things, and being too idealistic about what one thinks one should be, frustrate oneself. And then, of course, oneself is not happy, and then it's hard to bring a permanent thing, but it's more like, how do we get the balance of working on ourselves? And I mean, there's also a certain magical thinking. If I just look after the other extremes as well. So learning how to, and recognizing that these they're interdependent and rely on establish ourselves in wisdom and compassion, then we have that much more to give to others. Sensations like tightness and mental sensations of emotions that arise during meditation, is this part of the process to release karmas? How does practicing Buddhism help with finding, quote unquote, the missing pieces of making one's existence? There is to me, I think, a certain almost releasing, resolving karmas, working out one's karma, that doesn't. In the teachings, in the discourses. I mean, I know there are teachings around that but I think it unnecessarily complicates things, and I think it's much more helpful to pay attention arising from, what is it resulting in. That's something you can directly experience, or you can directly recognize how that's working, rather than adding another layer of projection and speculation as to criticizes the popular belief in his time of because some of the ascetic practice as kind of resolving and freeing oneself from past karmas, and the Buddha very explicitly criticizes and development and freedom from dukkha. How does practicing Buddhism help find the missing piece of making one's existence feel whole? Helping the mind to become more clear, one starts to experiment with, what works and what doesn't work? What is it that helps one feel, and what is it that keeps one off balance, constantly striving or hoping for something else to come and heal one, free one? It helps one to is suffering. That's the Buddha said over and over again. He just emphasizes, I teach suffering and the ending of suffering. So that being able to, and essential piece of our cultivation. Next question. I have a question regarding but one thing I often struggle with is the feeling of doubt regarding whether the practice I'm currently doing is the right one. I'm not sure if for the duration of the retreat I should simply focus on Buddho and the breath, if I should just kind of do them all when I feel like it. The latter seems to lead to a greater sense of doubt, though. Any help would be appreciated. Thank you for all your teachings. Practices, you have to pay attention to what works, what helps, and how, because the Buddha is not, he gives a whole range. There's an absolute right. There are some absolute wrongs, and don't kill, don't steal. That's not a great practice to cultivate. But one has to pay attention, learn how to pay attention to what increases wholesome qualities within the heart, within one's life, and what helps to alleviate or lead to the ending of those happiness or peace. So those are. It is a felt sense of what is right or wrong, as opposed to a thought-out sense. Life, because we tend to try to think things out all the time. And if I could just get the right idea somehow, or if I could just get the right information, if I just got the right information, then I because it doesn't matter how true the teaching is or how true the practice is, as long as one is doubting, one's going to, it's a function of doubt. It's doing wrong. It's completely fulfilling its purpose. And that's why in terms of doubt, I think I've mentioned because you're starting to get familiar with the felt sense of what does it feel like to be clear? What does it feel like to be, to not be wavering or doubting? And it's that felt sense that one has to nurture. And then also one can notice does it sort of look to, so then working with settling, clarifying, stilling, expanding the awareness and clarity, so that whatever foster, support, increased well-being and steadiness, and what's going to help to undermine or out of the practice. And doubt is a hindrance. It's one of the fundamental hindrances that get, and that's also where like drawing close to the teachings, teachers, and gaining increased confidence in. There's another question on gratitude that I think Ajahn Pasanno, his talk this morning. Next question. It's difficult to know how much is enough in life, whether it is about how much to eat. Again, this is something that you learn through experience, and you develop a sense of that accumulated experience then guide you in recognizing, what works. Sometimes what is enough today might not be enough tomorrow, in terms of, especially in terms of, in terms of eating or effort, or in terms of cultivation, in terms of social contact, in terms of quiet, and so all of that is to a certain degree is a what is quote unquote enough, and we have to have the clarity and confidence within ourselves through experience that we know for ourselves. Okay, what works and what doesn't work. What's helpful, what's not helpful, and then even when one is whether it's how much to eat or not eat, how much effort or not. It's okay to make mistakes as well. There's kind of there's almost like just trying to get it right all the time, and there's the Buddha isn't so concerned about us getting everything right. He's concerned, his path is about suffering and the end of suffering. So it's a very different standard, and ways that are quite universal to the human mind that affect us in negative ways, and similarly in positive ways. But it's the nuances are really only gained through experience. Okay, the next question. When one feels attachment to a person and wants to cool down, the contemplation of 32 parts of the body should be made to one's own body. Yes, in a word. In the sense that, again, whatever one picks up as a contemplation and it seems meaningful and useful at the time, and steady, then that's what's helpful. That's what works. And of course that help us to work with attachment, and the because just that's recommended for it's like the loving kindness contemplations. That cultivation of loving kindness is usually recommended for, say, aversion, ill will, anger. And say expanded universal reflection on the human condition and helps settle attachment and bias in some way, then it works. Elements, contemplating Four Noble Truths. So all of these are valid approaches, and one can experiment and again and see what may not resonate at another. So then one has to be like, it's helpful to have several tools in your as I go to bed before my alarm, which seems to indicate enough sleep, I still find my mind is dull, resistant, and at times depressed. Any suggestions for working with one of the and again, I can't emphasize it enough that experimenting with different practices and trainings, that one gets a feel for what actually is helpful, and it are morning people, and they like getting up in the morning, and right first thing in the morning is just like incredibly wonderful. And even if you had enough sleep, as sort of you start the day, dragging your butt trying to get it going, and it's just this. Different people have different. That okay, that's a tendency, and the one of the phrases that this is many early days of Amaravati, and in those days, Amaravati was, it was dismal. If for anybody who's in the early days, if anybody's been to Amaravati, then it was built by the Canadian Army, and they uninsulated, single pane windows, no heating, and an English winter, rain, cloud, and Laypeople started. So you wake up, dull, resistant, and first thing in the morning, just that leaping up with alacrity. Of course, he was setting the example. He would before the morning chanting and pujas, he would get up and do exercises, and he had a rowing machine. And just like physically, that's a helpful thing to do. Start the morning with some physical exercises. And you don't give the mind that much opportunity for finding things to be dull about. It does that pretty well. So just get. I do the Chi Gong warm-ups, and then I do a whole series of exercises, and then I do triple jam, dedications of blessings and reflection on the qualities of the Buddha, and then I come over for the morning chanting and meditation, and so it's just getting yourself moving, getting so, and even in sometimes there's always going to be some resistance or. But it's just you develop a habit, and then the mind changes because of the effort that one. Last one for today is not an actual question, but it is nice. It was, of course, it was. These are leftover questions from yesterday. And so, but it's referring to the talk that Ajahn Yaniko gave a couple nights ago. Then I haven't had it. If it's a happy, collected, composed state with confidence, then I have had it. I guess it depends on who you talk to and their lineage. Glad to hear the Theravada view of jhana. These states are. So on to today's questions. We'll have to do 15 minutes, yeah. Okay, so how many types of meditation are there? They say the classical Theravada text on meditation, and those are all culled from the scriptures. There isn't any place in the scriptures where the Buddha said, "Here are all the different meditation techniques that I teach." We studied and pulled them out and brought them together into one list. So there's 40. So that's then in 2,500 years, other types of meditation practices that have been developed and cultivated and taught. That's in the Theravada. Mahayana, similarly, they've got all sorts of Rangama Sutta that details a long, long list of all sorts of different meditation techniques. I don't know what number there is, but I'm sure there's lots, and one has the opportunity to develop some familiarity. How many do I practice? Mindfulness of breathing is my. Of course, Bhutto's not. That's specific to Thailand, in particular the Northeast. So that's something outside of the Visuddhimagga again. So there's all sorts of practices. I find my fundamental root practice is the mindfulness of breathing as the Buddha has outlined in the Anapanasati Sutta. Of course, access to insight is an extremely rich source of, let's say, a website that has all sorts of on Thai, although Theravada is well represented, but probably more fundamentally figure those out. Next question: do you have favorite monks and teachers? Well, of course, they're it's and dependent on sometimes just familiarity, and then also by temperament, so that and then I don't know. I think that's ordinary in the human condition. We're drawn to different teachers with a particular temperament or personality. I'm going to say to the lead up to the actual sutta is that the Sangha is practicing together in this particular place, and it's a very large gathering they're practicing. And say people drawn to them. They're people with different temperaments. Buddha is a teacher who is really focuses on the wisdom, psychic powers, and different feats of meditative, very special. Instances, who's the monk who's the Vinaya master? Upali is the Vinaya master, and so the monks who are interested in the Vinaya and the discipline and that kind of training. So that it's that's even in the Buddhist time. Particular capabilities. Similarly with the bhikkhunis, Khema was foremost in wisdom. And I think she was foremost in actually answering questions, in being able to clarify. So that's you got favorite monks and teachers. Somehow it'll all work out.
Calvin.
Yeah, Calvin. Yes, Calvin's my hero. And those who don't have them, what's your take on that? Well, I mean, I think it's really by. I think if one really pays attention to himself, of what's really important, because people want to have purpose and meaning, and they'll fill themselves up with all sorts of harmful, but to be able to return to that sense of dukkha and cessation of dukkha, that stress and the ending of stress. What is it that to be able to look at things through the felt sense, the experiential sense of how we, what is actually meaningful and what's purposeful. Next, what of that issue of dukkha? That's what's really meaningful. Mind to stillness. What brings the mind to stillness is happiness. And after me having emphasized many times now of, say, suffering and ending of suffering, to settle when it is happy. The mind is willing to be still when it is experiencing a sense of, and when I say happiness, it's not just one wants. But it's which is another perspective. Like there's the happiness of getting what one wants, and then there's the but paying attention to happiness and directing attention in a way that allows happiness. That sense of fullness and repleteness is what allows the mind, the heart, to be still. And it's something that pervades the whole body and mind. So close to good spiritual friends. There's the happiness of joining in a 10-day retreat with so many people who are sincere. I mean, that's a happiness to really pay attention to. The happiness of bringing to mind, rather than trying to force the mind into conforming to an idea that you think it should be, but paying attention to the teachings that are they really resonate with truth. One has and it's that allowing it to come in, pervading the whole body-mind complex, and there is a settling, a stilling there, because it doesn't need to go out and seek anything else. So just in very little things, just in terms of precepts and integrity and restraint, there's a happiness that comes. There's a happiness that comes. One reflects back, says, "God, that might have been there," and just having exercised some restraint, and then realize, "Wow, I'm glad I didn't say that." And that's a happiness. That's very true, and it leads to still. Done that. Wish I hadn't said that. There's a just those fundamental training in virtue, integrity, restraint that leads to happiness. It leads to stillness, cultivation of mindfulness and a the kind of whims and impressions that pop up in the mind. It's able to sustain attention. There's a happiness that comes from that. That is really, it's really precious. And then returning to that, reflecting on it, recognizing it, not making it. That's letting it settle in the heart. The heart tends to stillness, so that is a way of working with it. What is it that moves in terms of progress? Again, it's whatever helps the mind to relinquish whatever is unskillful, unwholesome, unbeneficial, and establish itself in that which is beneficial. Dhamma in discipline. That's a growing that is fundamental. Next question. This will be the last question. It's 2:45, right? Both through meditation practice as well as just watching them in daily life, do you have a preferred way to practice with them? Well, I would recommend that whenever and wherever they arise, that's when you practice. A fairly minor part of one's daily, in terms of a daily schedule, so that one's leaving huge gaps. And it isn't that, say if a dry season, and you have this perception, whether it's dry season or not, but fire. You're really, really careful around fire. And some kind of fire, then it isn't sort of whatever you see it, wherever you see it, that is where you put your effort into putting it out. You don't wait